Andy, Cara, welcome to Shifting Culture. Excited to have you both on at the same time. Andy, it's been 4 or 5 times now. Cara, the first time you've been on, I'm really excited that you get to join us. We'll see what the dynamic is with you and Andy. It'll be great.
You might watch this podcast might be watch two married people fight, and we'll see how that goes.
Well, we're gonna dive into a pilgrimage into letting go. Your new book you wrote together, taking a pilgrimage on St. Cuthbert's Way with your kids, and you just informed me that you have now just come back from Europe as empty nesters. You've already sent your daughter off to college, so now you have literally let go. So I want to know just briefly, how does it feel at the moment of the actual letting go of things?
The feelings haven't let go. I mean, we physically let go, but it's a tough transition. I mean, it's a journey.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I really, it hit me hard when our son went 2 years ago, and our daughter's a little closer, so that maybe feels better. Maybe because we went to Europe, and then I came back with this terrible head cold. It's like I can only really think about myself anyhow. So I don't know. But yeah, it is. It's really ironic that this book comes out. This was not planned as any kind of great, I don't know, Steven Spielberg like movie press release. It's not an Andy Kaufman like live promotional kind of wrestling on Letterman or something kind of experience. But we're actually, letting the book is about letting go, and we're in the middle of doing it even more directly than when we wrote the book.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Well, we're not going to get into something like Synecdoche, New York, where he's trying to control every little aspect of things. We're going to move into this pilgrimage. So, Cara, this pilgrimage itself was your idea of going on St. Cuthbert's Way. Take me into that for you. What were you trying to seek? What were you looking for to just go on pilgrimage?
Yeah. So I've spent many years working with the idea of Sabbath, both just personally, but in practice in my congregation as well, as a way of practicing presence. And pilgrimage is another way of doing that, and one that I really wanted to experience. I knew a lot of people who had gone on the Camino, but that sounded really hot to me and also kind of crowded.
Mm,
So there was something about the Highlands, the Scottish Highlands, that appealed to me, and just realizing how much walking is a part of the Christian story, is a part of sort of my sense of feeling present. So wanted to give that a try.
mm. And then where did it come in that it was going to be a family trip? And like set us up into you saying, let's go on a family trip and scheduling it for the best time in the
Yeah.
world to go on this trip.
Yeah, the best time in the world, plan anything. Yeah, so Cara said she wanted to do this, and we've had this. We're introverts, everyone in our family, so um, sometimes it's hard for us to talk to each other. Like we love being home, and we love being home because we are in our own spaces. So we have to be really deliberate, I think, about spending time together. And what that's always been for us is traveling. So because I've just had the real privilege of being, well, it's not always a privilege to be on airplanes, but the privilege of going around and talking to people about other books and things, that I've just, like, the one thing I'm absolutely dogmatic about is I have to fly just one airline. And I don't think they're a sponsor of this fine podcast, so I won't mention their name. But like you can get me to come and do, anything basically. I mean, I'm not going to sleep on anyone's couch anymore, but I will not come if I can't be on this airline. And that all started when my kids were young, because it was both like so hard to be away from them, and also a sense of being away to pay it forward so we could travel together. But then we'd get places with miles and have really no money to do anything else but walk. So like we could maybe do one or two. I could get them to Sydney, Australia, but we could go to the aquarium, and that was about all we could do, and maybe some ice cream along the way. And then we just walk these cities. So kind of walking and traveling had been part of this. And we had some of our best family moments, some of our worst family moments on these walks. And so when Cara said she wanted to do this, it just made sense to me that we try to do it together. It was an excuse to go to that part of the world and be in Scotland and be in the borderlands and have that experience.
So as you got up there, how did you start to realize that this was a pilgrimage into letting go, that there was something to do with control and uncontrollability that was happening in this walk, this pilgrimage?
Yeah, I mean, I had booked everything and tried to plan down to the smallest detail, sort of how this was going to go, except I hadn't planned, the relationships or the dynamics between us. And so being in a situation where, you've got all your stuff in suitcases and you're, eating at restaurants and showering in different places along the way, all of a sudden I'm bumping up against these kids who we've, raised and now already know how to do things like eat and shower. But I'm finding myself over functioning in asserting control over things that I'm like, if they haven't learned this by now, I'm not, me telling them this at this age isn't going to help. And so it really, in a sense, confronted just what is this stage of parenting where you've finished some of the steps and yet you're still relating to this person and you're not necessarily appreciating their choices about showering or eating. Um, but the real crux of it was that when we had been walking the first couple of days, our daughter had come off of a injury from a school bike trip. And so she was walking pretty slow and I was walking along with her. And Andy said to me one night after we got to our location, I'm surprised by how slow you're walking because you're usually kind of out in front. You're usually a fast walker. And I said, I'm just pacing myself to amazing. He said, well, I'll walk with her tomorrow. You go your pace. So we started the next day. And all of a sudden I was like, my pace? What is my pace? Like I've
Mm,
spent, 18 years matching my pace to the pace of these little ones that need me. And now all of a sudden I'm trying to figure that piece out. And
mm,
so it became a prayer. It became a mantra. Every step was like, God, help me let them go. Help me let them go.
mm,
So that's where, at least on my part, where it really became that emphasis and the sense of
mm.
pilgrimage. Andy had been deep diving into Cuthbert, so his was a little bit of a different
Yeah.
path there.
Well, yeah, and the other piece of that, which we didn't reference that you set us up for, was that we planned this for summer 2020, and then
Yeah.
it got canceled, and so we replanned the whole trip again. So Cara planned it once, then Cara planned it twice, and we were going to do it summer 21, and Europe opened, and we thought we were gonna do this, but Scotland never opened, not without like a 14-day quarantine or something. So it
Wow.
got pushed off until August 22, and it became a blessing. Like we didn't go into this thinking, when we planned this in 2020, that this was some kind of ritual of letting our kids move into adulthood or realizing that we're kind of, firstborn kids. Both Car and I are firstborn
Mm.
and, are control freaks. It wasn't a kind of spiritual walk of giving up control, but it just so happened now that here in 22, our son was a rising senior and our daughter
Mm.
would be in the middle of high school. And it really did become an experience of, kind of walking every step and letting our kids go. And our son, when we planned this originally in 2020, we were kind of worried about him. I mean, he had he was kind of classic for his generation of spending a lot of time on the computer, and we're like, gosh, can he walk this? And through the end of the pandemic, he became a major walker. Like he kind of the way he coped with just the stresses of the pandemic was eventually towards the end of it, after a very sedentary kind of situation for half of it. The second half of it was to walk and to move. And so he became our leader, ironically.
Mm.
But that meant he was out ahead. And for Cara, firstborn, I'm a firstborn. Our firstborn, who will refuse to be controlled as a firstborn, would be out ahead. In the first few days, we're like, slow down, stop. And then he always had an earbud in his ear, and I wanted to strangle him and wanted to control the experience he was having. Like, be here, be present, don't be listening to music or a podcast or whatever you're doing. And it did really become a spiritual practice for us of just letting him go, like literally go out ahead of us and watch him stop and then wait for us. And we've known this since he was small. The more we tried to control him, the more he rebelled, and the more we gave him freedom, the more he kind of came back to us. But it really became embodied in the walk itself, watching him do that. But it took a good 2 days for us to do that. Like we wanted to strangle
Mm.
him, and like that he needed to be around us. And actually, barking in the background is Birdie, who is named after Cuthbert. So Birdie's a year old, and Yeah. So there's, yeah, there you go.
But then tell me a little bit about Cuthbert. We got Birdie
Yeah.
named after Cuthbert. So tell me about Cuthbert. You go on St. Cuthbert's Way. Who is
Yeah.
Cuthbert? He's this crazy mystic man, there's some crazy stories around him. So
Crazy
who is he?
stories.
And
Yeah. So like the crazy thing about Cuthbert, so, you're talking about a kind of, Northumbrian kind of mystic 7th century, becomes a bishop, doesn't want to be a bishop. The interesting thing about him is we have nothing from his own head. Like, we don't have any sermons. We have no disputations. We have nothing from his own hand that's left with us. The only thing we have is the Venerable Bede, who was a generation after him, never really knew Cuthbert, but knew people who knew Cuthbert, wrote about him, and he kind of has become the saint of the north for people in the north of England and in the borderlands in Scotland. He's become this kind of saint and this kind of representation of that. And so so he's I think he's born 635 and becomes a monk after having a military career, they think, but does all these kind of crazy miracles. And what he's really known for, miracles that he did after he died. So where this pilgrimage ends is on the holy island of Lindisfarne, which you walk across on the mud flats, and he died on an island off of that because that wasn't remote enough, so he had to go to another kind of remote island because all the mystics of the Christian tradition go out into the deserts.
Yeah.
Since Anthony, but the poor British Isles monks, they didn't have any deserts to go to, but then they looked at the oceans and realized, oh, hey, that's basically a desert. So they tried to get as far out into the ocean as they could, and so he dies there, but then the monks bring him back to the holy island of Lindisfarne and then exhume his body. I don't know, I think it's 13 years later or something, which is kind of tradition. And there's no decomposing of his body. So the monks realize that this means there's a holiness running through him. But then even more so, Bede reports that his corpse essentially starts doing miracles. People who are sick are touched by his corpse. There's a really super gross story about a kid drinking the water that his after 13-year body was washed in, drank it and was healed. So, like there's some crazy stuff in the Christian tradition that for us moderns is hard to even contemplate. And once you have germ theory, it's really super hard to kind of think about this stuff. But yeah, that's the idea of it. And then it was eventually buried in with Bede actually in the Durham Cathedral in England. So interesting guy, and interesting that we don't have any sermons. It's just kind of reports of the miracles his dead body did, and then of course during his own ministry, the miracles he did as well.
Which is good. So then why do you take Hartmut Rosa and the uncontrollability of the world and use that as a conversation partner within your book, talking about resonance and really uncontrollability all the way through this pilgrimage? What was it about Rosa and that book specifically that really resonated, of course, with what you were trying to do?
It's impossible to talk about Rosa and not use puns. I don't know if you want to start with that, Cara.
No, go ahead.
Okay. Well, I mean, I think
start by saying Andy was like immersed in Rosa at the time, and so he couldn't help but start applying these theories to what we were experiencing.
Yeah, and in that book, Rosa even talks about raising children around kind of controllability, and he does this. It's a very small chapter in the little book, The Uncontrollability of the World, where he just talks even about life cycles and control, and now how we're even trying as late modern people to control death. Like we're trying to the last stage of our lives and how we die. We're trying to control that, and I don't know. We made some kind of comment at some point as we planned this trip, like maybe we could write a book off of this. Car's written 2 books, and I sit in this monastic cell in my basement and, peck away at the keyboard trying to write books. And we thought, well, maybe there could be a book here. But I remember sitting on the plane going home and thinking, it would be really interesting essentially to give a commentary of Rose's little book with the through line of this trip and kind of thinking about leadership and parenting as an invitation into uncontrollability, because I just do think this is the dynamic of both, that it feels like we're managing for control, and it
Yeah.
ends up doing the opposite of what we want.
But here's how that goes is like 4 months later, I'm sitting in the dining room and I get an email from my basement from Andy saying, "Hey, we're writing a book together. Here's my 40,000 words. Add your own and change whatever you want." And I was like, "Andy?" I mean, he just kind of went with it to see, I think, could this work? And then thought, oh, maybe it could. And then kind of batted it over to me. So it wasn't even like we sat down together and plotted out, here's how this book is going to go. And actually, it was a gift to me because I usually write just like a pile of things and then have to find the through line. And he just sort of handed me the skeleton and said, okay, do
Mm.
what you want with it. So it was really fun.
Yeah, you had to let control go when it comes to the writing of this book as well. And so take us into this modern age we live in, and why are we control freaks? Like, why do we want to control everything? Why do we want to make sure that we can't, move and shake everything so that it bends to our own will?
Yeah, I think this is one of the really interesting pieces about Rosa, because one reaction would be we're control freaks because we're just, as modern people, we're just awful people. Like,
Yeah.
modernity has made us terrible people. We're just consumeristic. We're just willing to just kind of destroy the earth for our own sakes. This is what makes us so bad. But actually, Rosa's a great lover of humanity and doesn't think that we want to control the world because we hate the world or we have any kind of diabolical response to it, that we actually really want to love the world, that we have
Mm.
experiences that speak to us in such a deep way. But one of the kind of curses, I guess, of being modern is that we then are kind of propelled to try to control those experiences and get
Hmm.
more of those experiences. So it's actually out of a love of being spoken to by the world, being connected, say, even to nature, or in this context of this book, connected to our children. I mean, we love our children so much and have such
Yeah.
deep resonant experiences with them and feel such deep responsibility for them because of the deep experiences we've had with them, that we think that the only response, and this is the tragic element of being modern, we think the only response is then to control them, or
Yeah.
control the environment in which they live so nothing bad would happen. Or, I mean, even that's a little bit too pejorative. So nothing would disconnect us from them. And then it's tragic because we end up destroying the very thing that we desire.
Mm.
And yet, and it would be complete folly. I mean, it would be utterly complete folly for, a fairy tale if us late modern people weren't so good at it. We're actually really good at controlling stuff. Like, we can control, well, depends on who you talk to. We can control the weather, or some people control the weather. But, like, we can at least control the temperature in our buildings. We can control air travel. I mean, we can get around the earth so quickly. I mean,
Mm.
there's a lot of dynamics where we've, as modern people, been able to control a lot of contingencies. And so, it would be utter folly for us if we weren't so good at it. But the reality is both leading a congregation, and Kara can talk more about this, but being a parent, out of the impulse to be so connected with them, we actually kind of are pulled into the illusion that we need to control them, and it actually destroys the very thing we want the most, which is to
Mm.
have these encounters, these conversations.
Yeah, it's not always negative or preventative. It's even like,
Mm.
we're gonna make good memories now. So you
Yeah.
all need to show up and care about this like I care about it. I mean,
I tried to do that in Europe this summer too. It didn't
Yeah.
work.
Yeah, you almost guarantee it won't happen when you're like,
Exactly.
today we're going to have 3 great memories that you're going to remember the rest of your life.
fun. You're gonna love this as much as I do, or as much as I think you should. I mean, we do that in congregations as well as with our families.
How do you do that in congregations? Like, what is it that we control as congregational leaders?
Well, I mean, I think we try to control sort of the message people receive, the experience that people have. We definitely have expectations going into things as far as what we want people to take away from experiences. But I also think we're afraid, very afraid of the uncontrollable elements. I
Mhm.
can remember some visitors to our congregation many years ago who had been in church leadership and were a little upset that in our prayer practice, we were kind of open mic about letting people share. Somebody shared something that was kind of uncomfortable for them and came up afterwards and said to me, you know, when we lead, we don't let just anybody say anything. And because you're also like thinking when that's happening, it is a moment that's completely uncontrollable. And, you know, is this reflecting poorly on me or on the congregation or on what I want people to take away from this and what will people think? Instead of, you know, the Holy Spirit meets us when we're human alongside of each other, and being human is messy and things happen. And that's not the end of the story. There's always follow up, and God meets us in that as well.
Uncontrollability is counter to all of us modern people. Like, I feel very uncomfortable with uncontrollability. And why is that? Why is uncontrollability actually good? What is it? What makes it us?
Yeah, well, I think what potentially makes it good, or the kind of through line, I think, in this book Rosa develops that we want to develop here and relate to parenting and pastoral work, is actually, I mean, underneath this, and I guess this is maybe why I like Rosa so much, he's working a kind of philosophical school of kind of Jewish philosophy that goes back to Martin Buber. And Buber's kind of point, of course, everyone who's hears the name Martin Buber knows the difference between the I, it, and the I, thou. But Buber's basic point is like in a modern society, you actually do have to have I, it relationships. You know, you have to relate to people, some people as it's. For instance, the
Mhm.
telemarketer that calls you, or you know the clerk at the supermarket or something. You just have to. There's just too many people. We're not living in small villages or something, so there has to be I, it relationships. But the problem that our muscles get built for I, it, and we lose the I, thou, and we lose, and what he really means by I, thou is the conversation, this kind of conversational dynamic. And so why uncontrollability is so important is not because we should ever glorify chaos, because I think that's one way to look at it, is like, and we say this in the book, like the last thing we want is our children. I mean, we're a little bit probably okay, more okay with this than even 2-3 years ago, like setting the menu, you know, like we would just have chicken fingers every night if they were in control of the menu. And I'm surely, you know, even now I'm not ready for them to take, I will never be ready for them to take control of the family budget. You know what I mean? Like, so it's not like an invitation into chaos, but the uncontrollability is there, much like a conversation, where when you are in a deep conversation with another human being, you do have to be in a stance of the uncontrollable, like where you're actually listening to what they say, not
Mm,
controlling what they say. And we've
yeah.
all had those conversations with people where we know they're not listening to us. They're just waiting for us to stop talking so they can talk. And that ends up being a devoid of relationship.
Yeah.
And just to clarify, the I it dynamic is more like transactional relationships. I mean, we have
Mhm.
transactional relationships all the time, but the problem is that then we turn those close relationships that are meant to be this sort of differentiation and connection into transactional relationships, because that's an easy way to feel in control and to try to get the other person to be like how we think it should be so that we feel more secure. It's a modern sort of gut response. I think
Yeah.
we have to choose that we're not going to do that, rather than like acknowledging, oh, this is a transactional moment. No, like we're that's kind of the default setting, it feels like.
Yeah, and then there is the dynamic that we just work with an imagination of a certain kind of economic kind of category in our minds. So we do think like, I don't know if you felt this way in Europe, Josh, with this summer, but you're like, we paid a lot of money for this. Like, we need to have an experience. Like, you know, this will be completely wasted. And I think even pastors can feel that way. Like, you
Mhm.
know, no one would say people paid to be here, but you do feel like if this is pure chaos, or there's an openness for the uncontrollable, people, yeah, people didn't
Yeah.
pay for that. You know, people paid to have a good experience. And again, we probably crassly wouldn't say it that way, but it's amazing how we function that way with our kids. You know, like,
Mhm.
you know, I paid not to have my flight be delayed, for God's sakes, and now you're ruining our experience, or
Yeah.
you know, or whatever.
Or the one time you go to the all inclusive and you've paid ahead, but then you get the stomach flu and you're like, I have to eat. I have to get my money's worth.
Exactly. Exactly. Yes. I think we had delays on every single plane and train ride in Europe this summer. And that's just how it goes. You also talk a little bit about aggressiveness and how us modern people are just aggressive to start. And one of the things that you talk about, like slowing down, is not going to help us move towards something or take vacations and get rid of some of this aggression that we all have. Where does the aggressiveness come into play with this control that we want to have in this world?
Yeah, well, I mean, this is how Rosa actually starts the book, which I think is fascinating. And in some ways, how our pilgrimage started too is he says, when we have this kind of drive to control things, again, because we want the goods out of them, we want to extract the goods, we think we've paid for the goods, so we want the goods back. What it ends up doing is creating in us not a point of connection with the people we're with, but a point of aggression where we feel like everyone we encounter, well, I mean, I don't know, you're probably better in your airport delays than I am, but when I'm in a major delay, every other human being becomes a point of aggression for me. It's like, get out of my way. Why are you walking so slow? Hasn't anyone ever taught you people not to walk 4 people across? Because I got to be somewhere, which I have nowhere
Yeah.
to be, but I feel like I have somewhere to go. Like I'm being blocked from living well and living in the
Yeah.
way I want to. So everything I encounter is this kind of point of aggression. And so there is a sense of what it means to be human is to live at points, that we're always living at points, in the sense that we're living at the points of encounter with one another. And those points can be filled with connection or they can be filled with conflict. But it also means that we live for a point. Like, what's the point of your life? What's the point
Mm-hmm.
of this trip? And when we do kind of get control to seep, then those points all become very aggressive. The point is to maximize my kids. So you think of this with like youth sports. The point of this is so my kid can get the most things out of this. And so all the other kids who are getting more playing time than my kid, I hate those people. You start to feel like you end up in conflict. This is one of the reasons why we can see so many social media videos of parents behaving badly at sporting events, is
Yeah.
because their kids' enjoyment of the sport gets overtaken for some kind of form of acceleration or from extracting some goods out of it. And so it just becomes a point of aggression,
Mm.
and ultimately they want their kid just to have a good experience. But the next thing they know, they're taking a swing at an umpire or yelling at another parent, and they just feel like the point of what they're supposed to get out of this is their kid is supposed to receive some goods from it that can build and keep them from falling behind. And it leads to this deep sense of kind of aggression. So you lose the conversation. The kid doesn't even get to have a conversation with the sport anymore, if we kind of can push the analogy. Now it's like, it's not about the love of the game. It's about what this coach can get for us. And this coach doesn't see my kid the way they are. So someone needs to take control of this situation. And as the parent, I'm going to take control of the situation. And then you get all the terrible videos.
And if we can't control other people, I mean, we go into it with our own goals and aims and
Yeah.
objectives and expectations, and then they clash up against somebody else's, and then they are just a barrier to our drive, and then become a point of aggression rather than a sense of security in something deeper than this
Mm.
moment we have to make happen the way we think it should happen. Bumping up against them having the same exact feelings
Mm-hmm.
and attempts to meet their needs.
So, what's happening with you, Cara, when you're bumping up against others and your expectations of others? How do you move yourself back into saying, okay, I could let go of my expectations of them? What's happening inside of you to be able to let go?
Well, I mean, sometimes nothing until later. I mean, sometimes I'm the jerk in the point of aggression. And it isn't until, I've vented to Andy and processed and, sort of stepped back and re situation. But the moments that it breaks through, I think, is when we see each other as human beings and, recognize that at our core, we all need and want the same things. We all want connection
Mm.
and belonging and security and groundedness and meaning and purpose and all of these things that are really beautiful. We just have differing approaches or strategies in the moment. And so when I can
Mm,
recognize the humanity of someone else, that will break open for me that moment and call me back to the I thou instead of the I it. Instead of this person
mm,
being this barrier to my desires, to see them in their humanity, which also gives me some compassion for my own humanity in the moment. And like, oh, I jumped to aggression here, and really it's because this longing I have is so deep and I care about
mm.
it. So that
Yeah.
there's some mutual empathy that can emerge when we can recognize one another's personhood.
Because we want connection, belonging, resonance, we want to be steeped in this. One of the things that you talk about is slowing down is not going to help us. And you say it in a way where your vacation or your weekends isn't just going to have some time off and then you're going to be okay. Because what we're trying to do with our vacation, whether you have the stomach flu and all inclusive and you want to optimize what you get out of it, and we want to optimize our vacations, we want to optimize our weekends. What does then help us move towards more connection and belonging and a different way of being rather than just taking breaks from who we
Yeah.
are?
Yeah, I mean, this is, I think, the revolutionary thing that Rose is trying to get, and we're trying to develop here, is that it is, how do we put ourselves in constant conversation? And it's not just conversation with other human beings, but conversations with the world. Like, how do we live in this kind of conversational way? And his point is, slowing down could help. Like, that could help. There's no reason to try to not slow down, but that the system is so insidious that it's going to take another form of being than just kind of taking a break from
Yeah.
this. And that is the kind of point that there is a real difference between a pilgrimage and a tourist event. And in some ways, it's late modern people, they get really blurred together. Like,
Mm.
we flew on that airline that should not be named, with all sorts of people who are, we're going on a pilgrimage, but it has it looks like it has all the accoutrements of being a tourist experience. And in many ways, like, there's a very kind of Seinfeld-esque kind of dynamic to this for those of the age where Car and I are just, well, I'll own this for myself, a bit immature. She's not. She's a very mature person. But we do have this kind of Seinfeld-esque where we just name, like, I can't remember anyone's name. So I just name them, weird things. So throughout the book, the people we meet on the trail end up getting these names, like Ponytail and the Three Maidens, which we cannot remember these people's names.
Yeah.
But that's what we called them. But the first time we met them, we were walking up to them, and one of these women says, "Where are you coming from?" And
Mm.
I responded like a tourist. I said, "We're coming from," and she was a British woman, and she was like, she kind of rolled her eyes and said, "No, no, no, no." Like, she did not care where I was coming from. She wanted to know where I was on this walk, like
Mm.
where I was in this journey, not how was I using these experiences to add to my
Mm.
experiences and therefore give me value or lower my stress or help my wellness. That wasn't the point. All there is on a pilgrimage is this trail, this path. And that is
Mm.
a kind of analogy of life, that we keep. This is part of the modern problem, is we keep on, we're the path of life, we're on the pilgrimage of life, and we keep on thinking like, okay, what do I need to maximize it? What do I need to get more out of it? And really the question is, where are you? Are you
Mm.
in sorrow? Are you in celebration? Is God distant? Is God near? All that matters is the trail and
Mm.
that which you're aimed towards, the holy place that you're aimed towards. So you're always doing this towards God, but also saying goodbye and moving forward and being on
Mm.
trail. And so I think part of our issue and why we want control so much, and then therefore lose resonance, or our weekends become optimized, is because they become more tourist experiences of, how do I leave home, harvest more experiences that add to my, I don't know, my sense of my life being good. They add to my Instagram feed, and then I go home. Like, how do I optimize that instead of thinking, what does it really mean to be on this path, and what does it mean to be on this path with these kids, with this congregation,
Mm.
saying goodbye and saying hello and meeting people along the way, but always aim towards the holy, towards God's
Mm.
very presence.
I would also add to that I mean, to say slowing down isn't the answer, if you don't slow down, you're also not going to have the experience. I mean, slowing down is a
Hmm.
component of it, but it kind of reminds me of Brueggemann saying, God gives the Israelites the other, takes them out of slavery with the other 9 commandments, but with the Sabbath command, he takes the slavery out of the Israelites. And there's
Mm.
that sense that what Sabbath or rest or pilgrimage or slowing down offers is the opportunity to be present in a different way. But if we take,
Yeah.
like Rosa's saying, if we take all of that sort of internal stuff with us and then we just try to slow down correctly and Sabbath well and measure our pilgrimage against the perfect pilgrimage and make it all this sort of competitive thing, not even against other people, but necessarily, but against some ideal or some internal drive, all we're doing is just taking these tools and turning them into tools for acceleration and measuring instead of allowing ourselves to actually be human beings in our frailty and in our beauty and in our connection and receiving the experiences that come to us.
Right, which is also the performative contradiction of us writing a book out of this too.
Yeah.
Because you can see this is Rose's point about the weekend is we go on this pilgrimage, we have this great experience with our kids, then we write a book really which is just a testimony of that experience, but now how will it sell? What will
Yeah.
people think? What doors will this open? What doors will it not open? Like you see how the whole system just starts to pull that in.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean, part I think Rose's point that's really helpful and we experience on the pilgrimage is that no one can perform their way out of this or can somehow come up with the right idea to escape it. Our
Mm.
pilgrimage starts with a fight over ice cream and my desire to control it, and it ends that way. It ends with the very last experiences realizing that our daughter has lost her retainer somewhere in Durham. Like we just had this incredible experience, and the day before we find out there's going to be a train strike. So now I'm freaking out. Like the trains are uncontrollable. This doesn't feel like a good uncontrollability. Like I'm freaked out about how are we going to get back to Edinburgh. We find out our train is going. It's like, oh my gosh, yes, we're going to make it. Has this
Mm.
beautiful kind of sense of the story coming full circle, and we've learned something. And then our daughter's like, I don't know where my $400 retainer is. You just think of the retainer as just an objective, just
Yeah.
an instrument of we're controlling our teeth so they come the right way, and then you lose this thing. This is the
Mm.
monstrousness of control. All of a sudden, this thing that really helps her have a beautiful smile and control her teeth, now you lose it. You're out $400 and your parents are screaming at you. We have everything of her bag out on the platform of the train. I'm freaking out. And that's how we get on the train. So this book is not the confessions of people who have it figured out, but who can feel this tension of, you know, even when you think you are aware of it and want to opt out of being control freaks, man, this world, particularly in the West, really does just push us back into trying to control.
And I love there's James Finley says it beautifully in a talk he gives about Meister Eckhart, because he says, the poet can't make the poem happen, but the poet can assume an inner stance of least resistance to having the poem come. The lovers cannot make their moment of oceanic oneness happen, but they can assume this inner stance of least resistance. And I found myself trying to be, I mean, you can't make these moments happen. You can't make yourself appreciate your kids or appreciate the experiences you're having, but you can be aware that I can't control any of this. I can sort of
Mm.
surrender to the uncontrollability of it and let myself be encountered. And I may be encountered and I may not be. I might have a resonant moment with these people I care about, or we might just argue and fight the whole time. But at least I can try to approach it with that sense of availability to the presence of God and the presence of one another.
Mm. That's good. So I want to know practically, how do I control uncontrollability? What does that look like? But no, really, what I want to know is, what does pilgrimage as parenting really look like? And what does pilgrimage as leading congregations really look like? How can we do this well?
Mm.
I love the metaphor of pilgrimage because it's that sense of walking alongside. I mean, that it is not there is sort of the further horizon that as Christians we're drawn to say that, God holds this story, this bigger picture. We don't.
Yeah.
So if we're held on this journey by a loving God and given these people to journey alongside with, what does it look like? Not to try to shape the path, but to be on the path with each other, knowing that God is going to encounter us
Mm.
through things that we can't necessarily see coming. And when they come, how do we maintain that view of one another's personhood in this sort of mutual sense of journeying together, and in suffering and in joy, and
Mm.
sharing those moments, knowing that that's how Christ encounters us concretely, is by being alongside with and for each
Mm.
other.
Mhm. Yeah, I do think that there's, this is probably a through line of my work too, is there's a necessity of confession. So there is something we can do. And what we do is create semi-controlled experiences, So like for
Mm.
instance, this podcast, no one can guarantee, I mean, you have an incredible track record, Joshua, but no one can guarantee that listening to this will be a resonant experience. But, if we try to do it well and it's available and people, have it up, there's a kind of semi-controlled
Yeah.
experience to it. So, worship, Sunday worship, certain practices families put, they are good and they are semi-controlled experiences. But the problem becomes the
Mm.
temptation, the modern temptation to actually make the semi-controlled experience the whole thing. And, so what you look at on Instagram is not a kind of way to be formed to create semi-controlled experiences. So a deep sense of conversation and togetherness can happen with our children or with our congregations. It's like this becomes the thing. And now I have to
Mm.
control that we get this out of it. So I think that the real practicality is how do we take steps in the Christian tradition? We've thought of this as practices. What practices do we take on that are semi-controlled experiences? But theologically, they in and of themselves are not magical acts that can guarantee God's presence. So even prayer and the liturgy, these are all semi-controlled experiences. And if you think because you do this liturgy, then God has to show up, then the God you're talking about is not the God of Israel and is not the God who is God.
Yeah.
And so to kind of take a step back and think about then how do we think about the way we raise our kids, and that
Mm.
really what our kids need is not us to manage their lives, which is the great temptation of this control, is we actually think the best pastor, the best parent is a manager. Your job is to go out ahead and manage everything for everyone. I don't think they need managers. I think that congregations and parents, they need persons to be in conversation with. And you're going to create some
Mm.
semi-controlled experiences for those conversations to happen, like going to Europe and sitting in a
Yeah.
cafe in Paris and having a conversation. But the minute you say, if we don't get 8 conversations out of our time in Europe, and if I equate that, that means we're paying 350 encounter. If I don't get that, this is terrible. And I'm going to write a very angry letter to someone at the tourist board of France. Just promises
Yeah.
it won't happen.
Or even, I mean, I don't jump to going to Europe or taking a pilgrimage, even, going to the dog park or gardening together, whatever. As soon as we
Yeah.
turn it into, a semi-controllable experience, but it's for the purpose of control, we've lost it. And I think
Mm.
it's fascinating that Rosa, as a sociologist, holds up, like in his book, names prayer as kind of the ultimate example of a semi-controllable experience that opens you up to something that you can't control that might encounter you.
Mm. So give me something within prayer. How do I open up myself to an uncontrollable experience with God, have God encounter me, and not just try to get God to do what I want God to? Because I think we all pray some prayers like that, like some controlling prayers. We're trying to
Mm-hmm.
control God, which doesn't work. But
There's
so
best-selling books from the 90s that would tell you how to control God with your prayers. Yeah.
yes, yeah. So what does it look like to lift these things up to God and say, "Okay, God,
Yeah.
your will be done."
Well, one thing that I think Andy's been talking about conversation is listening, and through the Christian tradition, listening is a more of a form of prayer talked about than telling God things. So
Mm.
that's a piece I think in our modernity we don't practice prayer that way. We we're always sort of talking and moving, and so we just want to sit down and tell God a bunch of stuff. But there's a woman in my congregation who brought this form of prayer to us, like when there's stuff going on and you've people on your heart, you want to pray, and we want to tell God what to do. Like my 3-year-old telling me, Mom, I want the toast with the butter all the way to the edges, and I want, like that, as though God needs to know, like guide the surgeon's hands and make sure that they do a good job. Like God knows what needs to be done here. But she has this lovely form of prayer where she just says, here now with you for Gaza, here now with you for
Mm,
my son. And you're not
mm,
telling God to do what to do, but you're letting yourself actually be present. I'm here now. I'm here now. God's always here, but I do
mm,
a bad job of showing up. So now here I am in the presence of God, and I'm with you for your purposes, whatever
mm,
those may be in relation to this person. And it's such a gentle way of praying. So that's kind of one example
mm,
I think that's been helpful for me. Like sometimes you have too many words or you don't have any words. And to be able to just say, in either case, the Spirit prays with groans too deep. So how do I align myself with the Spirit's prayer?
mm. That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Now, I need you to help me and my wife out. We are, a good 10 years behind you in raising our son, but we are also youth group kids that said we could go and change the world. We're firstborn achievers. Like, we want to go and achieve this parenting thing and we want to control it. What have you learned? Help me out. Help me and my wife out. My son is 8. What does a pilgrimage with him start to look like? What is it shifting? What have you learned that would help me in my shift towards letting, even in a place where he's too young to really let go?
Yeah.
But, you know,
Yeah, and obviously it's unique with each kid, but with our firstborn, one of the things that's been really powerful for us, and obviously he's almost 21 now, and we're still dealing with battles of control all the time, but is to say, and this may sound a bit harsh, but is to say it's his life. Like it's
mm,
his life. And that can seem flippant, like, well, it's his life, whatever the bleep happens with it is his responsibility. We don't mean it like that. For us, it's a mantra of a prayer of like, we can't control it.
mm,
And so what does it mean to parent in a way that we're aware that these people have their own lives to live and that they need us to be with them as, again, I'm reiterating what I said earlier, as a conversation partner about what is meaningful, about what's the purpose of life. They don't need me to control everything. And yet we fall into this trap, like, incredibly. Like, we are the parents who survey our kids all the time. Like, the Find on the iPhone, we know where our kids are at all the time. And we
yeah,
had an experience in Europe this summer where our daughter was with some friends, and they were not going to make their train. They were going to take a train out of Heidelberg and to make a connection in another German city so they could get to Lyon, where we had friends that were going to see them for the night, and they were not going to make it. So we're like, get in a cab. And then it was like a situation room. We were in a hotel room in Berlin, and it was like a situation room. We had 3 computers up, an iPad. We were seeing them. We were like analyzing, is the next train going to go on time? We were like basically had the miles per hour of the cab driver, and we're doing equations on. I mean, it was nuts. Like, so we're always in the midst of having to confess
yeah,
that we want to control every piece of it.
mm,
Like we think we know better. I mean, we're firstborn youth group stars. We know better than everyone what to do. So for us, the mantra that like is his life
yeah,
has been
mm,
a power. It's a prayer, really. It's not, it could be
mm,
seen as a kind of fatalistic, kind of grumpy, like, well, to hell with it. It's your
yeah,
life. But for us, it's a prayer of letting go so we can be put in a disposition to be in a conversation with him.
mm,
And the more we say that like, it's your life, it's his life, it's interesting, the more he becomes in a position to actually talk to us.
mm,
Mm-hmm. And I think that we haven't said much here about trust, but that's such a huge piece of it. Like
mm,
we act like God's not real. I mean, we believe God's real so much so that that's what we've formed our careers and our lives and our vocations around. But then we act like God's not real. And there's some trust and entrusting those we love into God's hands, but also it means that God is speaking to them just as much as God's speaking to us, and ministering through them as much as God's ministering through us. And so seeing our children as ministers and as capable of participating in this life in ways unexpected and unplanned by us is such a gift. I mean, it makes each moment when they're young, especially, this like, what might happen? Where's that moment of encounter that might occur where God meets us and through them and meets them through us, and or some beauty or experience in the world that we together share and then get to process. So I think it's to journey alongside kids in a pilgrimage mentality is just to also have to adopt their wonder and to have that sense of exploration. I mean, it's old hat for us. We've been in this world a long time, but everything's new when you're little. And, to be able to take on sort of their ethos of pilgrimage, that we've maybe lost the pilgrim and become kind of the worker and the manager, but they still have this sense of encountering things for the first time and seeing the world through young eyes.
Yeah. So try and control your reader's experience. What would you like them to get? But what hope do you have for readers? What would you hope that they get from your book?
Yeah, I think at the end of it, I think we want them just to breathe. Just breathe a bit and just be with these people that you've been blessed to be with in this church, and be with your children. We really hope that anyone who reads this book realizes this is not a parenting book of people who have it figured out in any way. This is a kind of anti-parent parenting book, in that there's a lot of struggle and a lot of confession, and just be.
That's good.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say the same thing about this is not a how-to. It is not how to parent better. So now you add pilgrimage onto your list of things to accomplish as a good parent. Like, oh, great. Now I got to do that too. It's asking you to step back and receive what's already there alongside each other, and this gift of a life, that it all comes from God and it all returns to God. And we are not on this journey alone. We're accompanied by the presence of Christ in the presence of one another. And so how do we just walk that and receive that?
Yeah. Well, that's beautiful. I'd love to get a couple recommendations from each of you. So anything you've been reading or watching lately you could recommend for us?
Oh, yeah. What are we watching, Cara? Yeah, I mean, we've been in the midst of traveling and being a little under the weather, so we've been watching some major garbage TV that we were raised on. So we've been watching MTV's The Challenge, the 40th anniversary of that, which just the 40th season. So I think they're actually on to 41 now. So that just, everyone who had any respect for us listening to this has just lost it right now, because it's absolute garbage. But yeah, so I'll try to go a bit more sophisticated. I've been back reading a lot of Bonhoeffer of late, and so trying to kind of think about a new project on Bonhoeffer, and reading some letters and some engagements he had with his twin sister, and thinking about that dynamic. Yep.
I just had to look on my Kindle because I never know the titles of books because I never see the cover. But I'm reading How to Inhabit Time by James K. Smith, which is really interesting.
Yeah.
Part of kind of this conversation a bit as well. That's what I'm reading at the moment, and I've been enjoying it.
Great. Good recommendations. Yeah, A Pilgrimage into Letting Go is available now anywhere books are sold. Anywhere that you would like to point people to, how could they connect with you guys?
Just anywhere where it gives us more control of the profit margin. No, wherever you can find it. You know, it's always easiest for us on that big mammoth called Amazon. You can get it there, but wherever you feel comfortable getting it, hopefully you'll check it out, and we would be honored if you take a look at this kind of very parenting book of a confession of failed parents more than expert parents.
Non-church leadership book too. I mean, take a load off. That's, to stop thinking this is yours to manage and control, and find the joy in it.
Amen. Well, Andy, Cara, thank you for this conversation. Thank you for giving us this pilgrimage into letting go so that we could actually embrace some uncontrollability of the world, and that we can let go and trust and say that God can actually encounter us and our kids and our congregations. And so we could actually have a beautiful life on the trail, on the path, as we go on pilgrimage to Him. So thank you. It was fantastic.
I'll let you say
Thanks
goodbye.
for having us.
There's Birdie back in her spot.
Bye, Birdie.
Nope.